The introduction of universal primary education in Uganda is an example of how developing countries have over the years made efforts to avail education to all children. Findings of the new report about scaling up quality education in developing countries, however, indicate that the quality of education in many of these countries is still wanting.
They're in school, but they're not really getting an education. A lot of kids are spending up to 4 years in school. There's about 250 million kids around the world, half of whom have spent about 4 years in school and are basically functionally illiterate and can't do basic maths.
Rebecca Winthrop, the director of the Center for Universal Education at the Brookings Institution in the U.S., says they sampled learning patterns in several developing countries over the last 2 years.
The average learning levels of kids in the developing world are about 100 years behind in some ways, kids in rich countries, and are not projected to change very quickly.
Lack of schooling materials, overwhelming numbers of learners, poor teaching methods, and inadequate funding, among others, are what the report lists as factors that cripple the quality of education in many developing countries. For Uganda, the report drew findings from Educate Uganda, a local NGO that pioneered a new way to teach entrepreneurship in secondary schools.
What they found is that the way entrepreneurship was being taught, because there is a subject, entrepreneurship, in secondary education in Uganda, was not conducive to actually getting the skills you need to be an entrepreneur. It wasn't interactive enough. The teachers who are teaching it are teachers, they're not entrepreneurs. So they also found in their research that the students had a hard time believing believing the teachers. And
the universal education model in Uganda has since its inception suffered criticism, especially in as far as the quality of teaching and learning is concerned. The private sector, on the other hand, has offered alternatives for better education, which unfortunately cannot be accessed by all. Although this report shows that the quality of education gap in many developing countries will not improve soon, it offers recommendations.
We need to have teachers teach in an interactive, collaborative, problem-solving pedagogy.
The findings of this report are part of the discussions at this year's Global Education and Skills Forum in Dubai.
A number of delegates from different education sectors from around the world are gathered here, this time with special emphasis to discuss how education can be made everyone's business.
Unless we make education our number one priority, then governments will not give the importance that is required.
How can the African education crisis be solved, in your view?
Well, actually, Africa has seen a lot of progress in equipping more young people, more students with access to education. There's been great progress on this. The challenge is still to raise the quality of the learning experience and also to improve its relevance.
Gertrude Tumusime with Kwadi, NTV, Dubai.